Well, hello, you're listening to another episode of More Perfect Marketing. My name is David Baer, and today I am chatting with Dennise Kowalczyk. How'd I do? Was that
You did. You get a big fat gold star, David. I'm so impressed. I mean, off mic, you pretty much had it, which I was really impressed. So well done. And I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Indeed. Now, listeners might be curious, who is this Dennise Kowalczyk and why is David talking to her? So here's a little bit of a story that you don't know. Maybe you do, but you shared a little bit about your background coming from Philadelphia to Portland, Oregon, and now you're back on the East Coast in, is it the Ocean State, Rhode Island? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, someone did his research. Thank you.
But here's the thing. I have a background in theater, and I have a lot of friends who work in the theater industry. I actually am from New York City originally, but I now live and have since 2008 in Portland, Oregon. And I spent a lot of time. I spent a lot of time in a theater right across the street from KBOO, where you spent some time as well.
Imago?
Yes, indeed.
Oh my gosh. Okay, what year? Like circa when?
Oh, anyway, this is a conversation for us for another time. But it's all to say that you can always find some connection with somebody out there, whether you're a business owner or whether you're just two people who happen to meet across the internet and say, oh, I have something in common with you. And that's something that I think we're probably going to dive into in a moment, because we're going to be talking about business and how to utilize all of these digital online things that businesses need to utilize to connect with an audience. And when you connect over something that is personal and familiar, like you and I just did, that can be pretty magical, don't you think?
Oh, I totally agree. I love those moments. When you find that synergy in a conversation, it does make such a huge difference as far as where a conversation can go. It could lead to a project. It could lead to another introduction. It could lead to a business relationship, but just that initial point of making a common connection. That's so cool. I love that stuff.
Awesome. Well, this is important, I think, for so many businesses to think about, because when you connect with people outside of here's the thing I have to sell you, right? You ultimately have somebody who's much more interested in having a conversation with you.
Yeah, indeed. Indeed. And, here's the thing, in the digital world, the digital presence, and I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on it, is that I think there's still very much an opportunity and a need to have a personal space in the digital space to build the relationships and help get, whether it's products, services, messages, friends, events, theater, whatever it is, the digital space still needs to be personal. And there's a certain degree of intimacy in that space. And I think that really makes it more meaningful and genuine. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think absolutely, right. The idea that we do business with people we know, like, and trust, right? That often you'll focus on the know, like, and trust. I like to focus on the people part of that phrase, right?
Yeah.
And it's very often a client of mine will come to me and they'll tell me, here's what I've been doing with email marketing. And the email comes from the entity, the business, not the person. And I said, well, that's one of the very first things we want to change, is developing a relationship with that person in your inbox rather than that organization or business.
Total truth there. Yes. Truth bomb.
So I'm curious to hear a little bit about the work that you do, because I know that you're sort of multifaceted in the areas that you cover when working with businesses. So why don't you give us a little introduction to the kind of stuff that you focus on?
Sure. Thank you. So I work with service-based small businesses that have a little bit of a digital presence, but it's clearly not as bold and robust as it can be, and not being leveraged as strategically or effectively to connect with potential customers or clients. So I work with small businesses, say, okay, let's take a look at what you have, what you're doing correctly, applaud, but what are the opportunities you're missing, right? So for example, I'll talk to clients and they'll say, well, I got to be on all the social media. Oh my gosh, I got to do it all. I got to do it all. I said, no, actually, you don't. Let's just take a deep breath and let's figure out a good starting point. But really, before we even get to that, who the heck are you? Have you done any kind of evaluation on brand positioning, right? Some even basic brand positioning to understand who you are, linking up, syncing it up with what you're offering, and who are you trying to connect with, really identifying who your ideal client is. So I start there with my clients, having basic conversations just to get some solid footing as far as from branding, ideal client, and then looking at broad opportunities in the digital space to utilize those spaces in a strategic way, in the sense of like, well, where do you start? You can't do it all. These are solopreneurs. They're like me. Okay. I do not have a staff of 20, okay, helping me take care of business. It's me, myself, and I. And when I consult with my own leadership team, you have to figure out where the priorities are, right?
So I want to touch on this brand positioning, because I think the word brand often will scare a small business.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the emphasis is really positioning more than brand. But let's talk in real world terms about what that might look like for a business. When you say service-based businesses, pick an example of that you want.
I will pick someone. All right, someone who does ancestry research. People hire that person to find out who their Polish ancestors are, for example, right? So when someone is looking for someone to do their family tree, if you will, because they're Polish in background. When the first thing they do, right, is go online, right? I don't know what the stats are, but is it like 75, 80% of people go online to find out, about the business or things of that nature. So let's say they have, if any, SEO. I'm not an expert on SEO, but you need to do some basic stuff if at least from the get-go. But let's say they find that website and it has broken links. It really is not clear, like, who is this person? What does this business do? Why would I want to work with them? All of that. Am I someone they want to work with? It's not very clear. It's as clear as mud when they go to their website. Or maybe they find a referral or recommendation or a common connection on LinkedIn, let's say, and they go to that person's profile and they're like, well, wait a minute, there's nothing even here remotely current about their work in ancestry research. So when I work with clients, I'll say, let's take a look at your website. It's your digital doorway. Just make sure it's got all the links working, that there's a clear call to action, if you will. So when people come there, they know who you are and what the opportunity is for them to engage with you. Maybe it's a free discovery call, for example, or maybe they want to get more information, so they sign up for an e-newsletter, if you will. But whether it's imagery, your copy, all of that kind of stuff really needs to speak to who you are. Mm-hmm. So if I am trying to, for example, encourage people to look into their Polish ancestry, build their family tree, and have so much fun doing it, my copy, the words that I have on my website, should encourage folks who see that, oh, this is someone who's having a lot of fun doing this work, as opposed to someone who's like, I need someone who's very academic, who's very serious, who's going to prepare a 50,000 page report and do a PowerPoint presentation, yada, 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 yada. So that has to come up very clearly when they first step on or visit your website. So when someone might find you in another digital space, that has to sync up. So it's like, wait a minute, I'm on the LinkedIn, or I'm on the Instagram, or I'm on the Facebook, and that looks like nothing I've seen on that person's website. Is this even the same person? Are they doing the same thing? The consistency, right? So that's
it sounds like consistency, credibility, right? Is this actually a real business? Is like, the broken links issue, or the covering the particular positioning on the topic.
Yes.
And that there's some specificity around the concentration in that industry. So while somebody might be a specialist in either Polish, family history, or in producing beautiful artworks out of family trees, right? Which are two different variations on what you could. Somebody else who might be preparing that 50,000-page document or whatever the number was that you picked, might be working in the inheritance space, right? And they're really tracking whether some ancestor is actually related to you, and therefore you own the rights to something, or you earn the ability to show up in court and claim access to something that somebody owned previously. Two completely different versions of the business. By the way, I've never ever heard of ancestry research as an example used when talking about service businesses. I love that example.
Well, wink, wink. I do have a client, not Polish ancestry, but something else. So yes.
Yeah, but you changed the nationality to protect. Anyway.
There you go.
Well, brilliant. So clearly, understanding who your business is going to appeal to is a critical piece of this.
Right.
And that hopefully helps inform where you're doing things, what you're talking about, and as I alluded to earlier, things that you can even engage people around that are outside of what your business does.
Yeah, exactly. So you have to know who it is you're trying to connect with. Now, you can do the idea. I do it like an ideal client survey. I come up with a little avatar. It's a guidepost, right? It's understanding as best as you can to know, for example, well, does this person spend more time likely on LinkedIn, or are they tweeting, or they don't even do the social? They prefer e-newsletter, are they someone like me who takes a walk every day and listens to podcasts, right? So trying to get a good sense, the best sense of who your client is, then you figure out how to use those assets, those tools and resources to get there. And as you were pointing out, also, I would add, your authority, right? Your knowledge of demonstrating what you know about the work and the services you're providing your clients needs to be also consistently pushed out into the digital space.
Totally. Okay. So now a business that comes to you to get some help from you, hopefully they are a little bit of established. They have figured some of these things out, but they're looking for a little bit of guidance. And so you sort of have walked us through sort of the baseline stuff that you'll cover with them. How do you determine what the best avenues are, what the best paths are? Do you focus on, what's the goal? What's the outcome you're trying to achieve? Do you focus on, how do you kind of go through this process?
Well, I think there's several variables. Yes. What are the client's goals and intentions? I also want to know how they feel about digital space. Some people hate social media, but recognize that they need to use it to have a successful business. So having those conversations up front to really understand where my client is coming from. And also what is really critical with my clients is that there's a curiosity to learn and an experiment. I don't always like to play it safe because there's no absolutes, as we know, in so many ways nowadays. So having that mindset of saying, okay, I know there's an opportunity. I'm willing to take some chances, do some exploring. No, it's not going to be overnight. It's going to take some time and other resource investment, but a willingness to try to see what could be the best fit for them based on, of course, research as to what might be a good fit for their type of business, if you will.
So there's lots of different social channels, for example, or there's lots of different corners of the internet, the digital world. And I heard you say earlier, well, you don't have to do it all. How do you figure out what, the top things to select from might be?
Well, understanding their sector, their industry is very key, right? So for example, if they're trying to connect with 20 somethings, Facebook is probably not going to be likely the best space for them. It might be TikTok, if you will. So then understanding, okay, well, if that's the space they're in, are you going to do your TikTok or are you going to outsource your TikTok, content creation? It could be, maybe they're trying to connect with a 50-year-old woman who is trying to run a bed and breakfast, I don't know, in Italy or something like that. But, a place for them to be might not be LinkedIn or Twitter, right? So trying to look again at the ideal client and what their social media usage looks like, and industry, what the current trends are, right? And then sort of pulling out of that what the opportunities are for the client's business to say, okay, this is where we're going to go. Now, how do we roll out the plan? And not like, oh, I know I'm going to post next week when I'm there next week, right? Being strategic with an editorial calendar, and the consistency is also key, right?
Consistency is a huge key, because obviously, particularly a lot of what you've been talking about, which is social platforms, that stuff, while it may sit around online forever, doesn't get seen forever, right? It gets seen for a very short window of time, and then people's attention and the algorithms move on to something else.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much content out there. And people will say, my clients will say, well, how do I get heard or seen above it all? And that's where you have to work and experiment and really roll up your sleeve and do the work. But you have to be out there. And I also say, don't try to be 12,000 things in 12,000 places. Be thoughtful and intentional, and pick one or two things. So I'm a big believer of the e-newsletter and the power of the e-newsletter to get folks back to the website. And so I talk to my clients about getting that kind of content out in the world. And blogs, having blogs on your website is a great way to help in a number of ways. And you can repurpose that content in many, many ways. And I'm a huge fan of repurposing content. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every time.
So I know a lot of people in our space talk about repurposing. For a business owner who understands the word but doesn't necessarily understand how we're using that, can you give an example of how something gets created and then repurposed?
Sure. So, for example, a blog post that sits on your website, and then you can reuse it on your e-newsletter that's sent out. You can use it and post it on your Facebook page, if you will. So there's all these variety of ways of using that content. You could also modify it and put it on LinkedIn as an article. So thinking about different ways. So for example, another way is, now I think of it this way, sort of, I'm not gonna say hierarchy, but let's say you do a Zoom chat. Okay, here you go. So you have video. You can put that on your Facebook. You can put that on your YouTube channel, right? You can then also extract the audio and have a podcast, right? You can also use an app to transcribe it and create a blog. And then back to my earlier example, then take that blog and put it on your e-news and your social. So people consume content in so many different ways, and people have certain preferences too. So it's important to, again, understanding your industry or your sector, if you will, your client, how they consume it, and then really leverage those different spaces in order to appeal to your ideal client. And then also maybe be out there more broadly, so some other folks might find you too.
And obviously there's also limits to that. So you know that your ideal client may not consume things a certain way. Well, then you don't need to worry about repurposing in that direction necessarily.
Exactly.
Got it. And if a business is sort of feeling their way through all of this, they're building these pieces out. A lot of the fear that I often hear from a business is, well, it always has to be something new, right?
Oh, no. So this is another thing, I call them content shares, if you will. So there are other people who are doing similar things, right? and who are filling in the gaps, if you will, or amplifying what you are doing as a business owner, right? Well, you can push that out, of course, giving attribution. You're not going to take it for your own, but to read a good blog or listen to a great podcast or see a YouTube interview or what have you, and then sharing it out and giving your take on it, and then giving attribution to the person who has created that is very important. And it's very fascinating because you can learn in the process by consuming that content. And also you're educating your clients and your audience, if you will, by sharing that content as well. So I love content shares.
I've never heard the term content shares, but I love the concept. It's.
Thank you.
I think we will call it like curation. Maybe I've used the term before, but this is a spin on it, because it's really not just taking it and saying, here's something I found. It's saying, and this is what I think about it, and this is how it can apply to you, or right. So that's great. I love that.
Thank you. Thank you.
So you, as I said, earlier, do a wide range of things, and in fact, your business isn't, it doesn't even have the title marketing in the name. That
was intentional.
CTD Creative. So I wonder if you can give us, before we wrap up, kind of a little overview of the types of projects that you tend to work on and enjoy working on the most.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, some of the services I do is, the branding part, the ideal client part, but also working on a marketing opportunities document, if you will, and then also creating marketing plans for the clients, and then implementation of portions of that plan. So I have one client, she loves doing e-newsletters. Okay, great. I'll give some strategy and some consult on how to do that the best way she can, but she has no interest in working on Instagram, right? So then we work together to make sure everything's synced up. Then I will manage her Instagram. So it's some people will come to me and say, can you just do a website or a digital presence audit, and then give the feedback, and I'll go from there. Or others will say, well, let's really suss this out more and come up with a plan, and let's implement the plan.
Beautiful. And it's never the same twice, right? Which is what makes the type of work that you do fun, I hope.
I do. Yes, it's loads of fun. And I'll tell you, when I work with someone who's a little nervous, they don't really know where to start, and they don't have the time to really work on this, when they say, thank you, Dennise, for showing me these opportunities, and thank you for helping me connect with even more people in the social media space, because I believe we have to keep the social in the media, if you will, and not totally lose it to, automation, full automation and all of that. We need the humanity still in social media. So that's, when I speak to a client and that resonates with them, that's very exciting.
And that brings us full circle to where we started, which was making connections around things that matter to us as people.
Exactly.
Done and right on time.
I
Dennise,
love
it. Where can people find you if they're interested in learning more?
Okay, the best place to go is to my website, ctdcreative.co. That's the best place to go.
.co, not com. Leave that last M off. Right?
That's right. Exactly. I had to keep people on their toes.
Got it. Well, brilliant. Dennise Kowalczyk, thank you so very, very much for joining me. And I really appreciate the time that we spent together and hearing a bit of your insights.
All right, David, I really appreciate the time. So thank you so much for having me on the show.
Indeed. Folks, you have been listening to another episode of More Perfect Marketing. Hope to see you back here again real soon. Take care.